There comes a moment in every toxic dynamic when something shifts, quietly at first, then unmistakably. It's the moment the narcissist realizes their grip on you isn't as strong as it used to be. You're not reacting the same way. You're not shrinking the way you once did. And you're no longer absorbing their chaos as if it's your responsibility. This is the moment their entire illusion begins to crack. Because a narcissist's power has never come from strength. It has always come from control. And the moment that control slips, even slightly, they start to unravel. Today, we're going to talk about the signs that reveal exactly when that unraveling begins. The subtle cues, the emotional storms, the sudden shifts in behavior. These are the indicators that a narcissist is not just uncomfortable, but genuinely losing the power they once held over you. These signs aren't about drama, they're about clarity, because once you understand them, you stop taking their reactions personally and start seeing them for what they truly are. Evidence that you're stepping out of their shadow and back into your own power. When a narcissist finally begins to lose control, the first and most revealing sign is that their usual manipulation tactics stop working, and this shakes them at their core. Narcissists rely on predictable patterns, gaslighting, guilt tripping, silent treatments, love bombing, and emotional intimidation to keep people confused, compliant, and emotionally dependent. These tactics are not random. They are the narcissist's survival tools. They use them to maintain a sense of power, superiority, and emotional dominance. So when you stop reacting the way you used to, when you stop being affected by their moods, when you stop apologizing for things that were never your fault, the narcissist feels an internal collapse. It's as if their entire operating system malfunctions. The narcissist starts noticing that their words don't have the same impact. You no longer flinch when they raise their voice, and you no longer try to calm them when they escalate. You don't chase their approval like you once did, and you don't fall into the emotional traps they carefully set. That shift terrifies them because their sense of self is built on the illusion that they can control how you see yourself and how you see them. Without that power, they feel irrelevant. A narcissist cannot tolerate emotional irrelevance because it threatens the fragile ego they work so hard to protect. When they sense their grip loosening, they begin to panic internally. They may become more aggressive or more dramatic, exaggerating their reactions in hopes of shocking you back into submission. Or they may go the opposite direction and attempt to be overly affectionate, apologetic, or attentive in ways that feel unfamiliar or forced. They are not doing this because they suddenly realized your worth. They are doing it because they realized their tactics are losing effectiveness. It's strategic, not sincere. This moment, when manipulation no longer yields results, is one of the biggest ego injuries they can experience. They feel exposed, powerless, and deeply threatened. You not responding to their tactics forces them to confront a reality they've spent their entire lives avoiding. They don't actually have control over other people. And for someone who has built their identity on dominance, that reality is intolerable. The narcissist becomes hyper-aware of every small sign of your independence. The more indifferent you become, the more unstable they feel. Your emotional detachment becomes their emotional unraveling. They start trying harder, pushing harder, reacting harder, because deep down they know they're losing the very thing that keeps them inflated, your reaction. When a narcissist starts losing control, one of the most striking signs is that their mask begins to slip, and the polished, charming, in-control version of themselves they present to the world starts to crack. Narcissists live behind a carefully constructed persona designed to hide their deep insecurities, fears of inadequacy, and fragile self-esteem. This mask allows them to appear confident, admirable, even superior. But when they sense they are losing their power over you, the emotional pressure becomes too great, and they can no longer maintain that facade. Their real self begins to leak through, raw, volatile, insecure, and reactive. This is when you start to see unpredictable mood swings. One moment they may be calm, composed, and trying to appear unbothered, and the next moment they explode with anger over something minor. Their irritation becomes visible even in situations where they once acted charming and collected. The reason is simple. Their internal equilibrium depends entirely on feeling in control. And once they sense that slipping, they can't regulate their emotions. Their usual emotional strategies, pretending they're above it all or acting like nothing affects them, don't work under the pressure of losing dominance. They also become increasingly inconsistent. You might notice that they suddenly act defensive when you ask simple questions or become suspicious when they never used to be. Their need to regain control makes them hyper-reactive, and any hint of distance from you feels like a threat. This unpredictability is a sign that they're scrambling internally, unsure of which version of themselves will effectively pull you back into their orbit. Their insecurity becomes impossible to hide. They may accuse you of being disloyal, ungrateful, or selfish because they can't stand the idea that you're no longer prioritizing them. They may become hypersensitive to criticism or even perceived criticism, interpreting neutral statements as attacks. The mask that once made them appear confident now slips enough for you to see how easily shaken and emotionally fragile they truly are. As they unravel, their attempts to regain dominance become more desperate and less strategic. What once appeared controlled now looks frantic. Their charm becomes forced, their anger becomes disproportionate, and their attempts to appear superior start coming off as insecure defensiveness. They can no longer maintain the image that everything is under their command because losing control exposes the emotional instability they work so hard to hide. This slipping mask is one of the clearest signs that the narcissist's inner world is collapsing under the pressure of no longer being able to control yours. When a narcissist realizes they are losing control, their behavior shifts in a way that is unmistakably desperate, as though they are cycling through different versions of themselves in hopes of finding the one that will pull you back in. This sudden inconsistency is not accidental. It is a survival reaction. Narcissists depend heavily on predictable responses from others, especially from those they believe they have influence over. When those responses change, they lose their sense of emotional stability. That's when you begin to see them switching rapidly between charm and hostility, affection and resentment, confidence and insecurity. They don't know which tactic will work anymore, so they start trying all of them, often in a frantic and disorganized way. One moment, they may treat you with warmth, going out of their way to be sweet, attentive, even sentimental. This is their attempt to revert to the early stages of the relationship, when love bombing worked effortlessly. They hope that reminding you of the affectionate persona they once used will be enough to pull you back into compliance. But the moment they sense that this softer approach isn't working, they snap into a different version of themselves. They may become irritated, accusatory, or cold, punishing you emotionally for not falling back into line. This back and forth behavior is a sign that they no longer trust their manipulation skills, and losing that confidence terrifies them. Another part of this desperate shift includes suddenly changing their tone, their priorities, and even their values to match what they think you want to hear. They may suddenly understand your feelings, promise to change, or claim they've had deep realizations about the relationship or their behavior. These moments often feel strangely rehearsed or overly dramatic because they're not rooted in genuine self-awareness, only in fear of losing relevance. And when those rehearsed words fail to move you, the frustration becomes obvious. Their inability to predict your reactions makes them emotionally unstable, and that instability leaks out in ways they can no longer hide. They also become highly reactive to your independence. If you show confidence, calmness, or emotional distance, it triggers them. They may lash out, accuse you of thinking you're better than them, or insist you're being selfish or uncaring. These reactions stem from their disbelief that you're no longer under their emotional influence. Every sign of your growth feels like a threat to their sense of control, so they start shifting behaviors rapidly to see what will make you shrink again. This desperate cycle of switching personas reveals one truth. The narcissist no longer knows how to manage you. Their emotional instability is not about love or concern. It is about losing the psychological hold they once had. Their frantic attempts to regain control expose the fragility beneath the surface they try so hard to protect. When a narcissist begins to lose control, one of the most obvious and exhausting patterns you'll see is their escalating need to blame everyone and everything around them. They cannot tolerate the idea that they are responsible for any part of the situation. So the moment their hold over you starts to weaken, they immediately shift into blame-shifting mode. This is not just a habit, it's a psychological defense mechanism. Accepting responsibility would require them to confront their own flaws, insecurities, and destructive patterns, and that level of self-awareness is unbearable for them. So instead, they project all of it outward, creating a narrative where they are the victim and everyone else is the problem. When they sense they're losing their grip, their blaming becomes louder, sharper, and more exaggerated. They might accuse you of being disloyal, ungrateful, dramatic, or impossible to deal with. They rewrite history to make it seem like they always tried, and you were the one who ruined everything. They'll bring up situations where they were clearly at fault, but retell them in a way where they appear justified, misunderstood, or even heroic. This rewriting is not about truth, it's about emotional survival. If they can convince you that you're the problem, they feel safer. If they can make you doubt yourself, they regain a piece of the power they're losing. You may also see them attacking the people around you. Friends, family, coworkers, anyone who supports your independence becomes a target. They'll criticize your support system, call the people close to you toxic or manipulative, and insist that others are influencing you unfairly. This is their attempt to isolate you emotionally, because the more alone you feel, the easier you are to control. They cannot accept that you are thinking for yourself, so they blame someone else for getting into your head. As their sense of control slips further, their blame can become almost frantic. They may accuse you of things that make no sense, twist your words, or insist events happened in ways that are completely distorted. This confusion is intentional. Narcissists rely on chaos to keep you off balance, and blame shifting allows them to avoid accountability while destabilizing you emotionally. Even when confronted with undeniable facts, they will double down. Evidence doesn't matter. Logic doesn't matter. Their ego demands protection, and blame is the shield they use. What's most revealing is that the more responsibility they avoid, the more obvious it becomes that they are losing control. They can't regulate their emotions, they can't hide their insecurity, and they can't maintain the illusion that they are in charge. Their relentless blaming is not strength, it's proof of their unraveling. When a narcissist feels their control slipping, they often become intensely preoccupied with monitoring you, watching you, and tracking every shift in your behavior. This obsession is not rooted in care or affection. It comes from fear. Narcissists operate on the belief that the people in their lives exist to feed their ego, validate their superiority, and revolve around their needs. So when you start creating emotional distance, asserting boundaries, or showing signs of independence, they experience it as a direct threat to their identity. Your autonomy destabilizes them because it proves something they deeply fear. They do not own you, and you are not dependent on them. This is when their watchfulness increases dramatically. You may notice them asking more questions than usual, probing into what you're doing, who you're talking to, or where you're spending your time. They may appear suspicious or accusatory, even if nothing has changed. Their paranoia rises because your independence represents the loss of a resource they once relied on, your emotional attention. Every moment you don't spend thinking about them, comforting them, or reacting to them feels like abandonment. They may check your social media more frequently, monitor your online activity, or suddenly take interest in conversations they previously ignored. They are searching for signs that you are slipping away, because to them, losing access to your emotional energy is like losing oxygen. Their need to regain control often shows up in subtle ways too. They might test your reactions by suddenly going silent, acting withdrawn, or manufacturing minor conflicts. They are watching closely to see if you chase them the way you used to. If you don't, their insecurity spikes even higher. They may become clingy or unexpectedly attentive, trying to lure you back into familiar patterns of reassurance. But the moment that doesn't work, they flip back into suspicion or agitation. This back and forth behavior reveals that they are not confident in their control anymore, so they resort to surveillance, emotional, conversational, and sometimes literal. They may also begin inserting themselves into areas of your life they previously didn't care about. They want to know your plans, your routines, and your interactions because they are trying to identify the exact point where they lost influence. The fear of being replaced or forgotten drives this obsessive monitoring, not because they value you as a person, but because losing you means losing a reflection of themselves they depended on. Independence, to a narcissist, is the ultimate insult. When you no longer react to their emotions, no longer prioritize their needs, and no longer dance to their rhythm, they panic. Their increased watchfulness is a sign that they feel the control shifting out of their hands, and they are desperately trying to grab whatever pieces remain before you slip fully beyond their reach. When a narcissist reaches the point where they realize they can no longer pull you back into their cycle, something inside them shifts dramatically. They stop trying to manipulate your emotions in the ways they once did because those strategies no longer produce results. Instead, they switch into self-protection mode, a psychological retreat designed to shield their fragile ego from the pain of losing control. Narcissists are not built to handle emotional defeat. They interpret your detachment as a personal attack, a deep humiliation, and a threat to the grandiose image they hold of themselves. So rather than face the reality that their influence has faded, they construct a new narrative, one where they are either the victorious survivor or the indifferent bystander. One of the most common responses is the smear campaign. They may begin telling others that you were the problem, that you were unstable, ungrateful, or difficult. This rewriting of history helps them feel superior again. If they can portray themselves as the hero or the victim, they avoid confronting their own failures. Smearing you allows them to regain a sense of control, even if that control is based on lies. They need to protect the image they present to the world at all costs. Another reaction is sudden emotional withdrawal. They may act cold, dismissive, or unaffected, pretending that losing access to you doesn't matter to them. This emotional shutdown is not strength, it's avoidance. It's their attempt to convince themselves that they don't care, because caring would mean admitting that they have lost something valuable. They might block you, ignore you, or behave as though they never relied on your attention or validation. This isn't emotional maturity, it is self-preservation. By acting indifferent, they protect themselves from the shame of losing the power they once had. Some narcissists take it even further by completely erasing you from their narrative. They pretend the relationship, friendship, or connection never held significance. They may suddenly detach from your life, your achievements, or your presence, all to maintain the illusion that they remain unaffected. This erasure is their way of psychologically deleting the evidence of their failure. If you never mattered, then losing control over you can't hurt them. They may also retreat into new supply, someone who gives them the attention and validation they lost from you. This rapid shift is not about love or genuine connection. It's about soothing the wound to their ego. They chase someone new to reassure themselves that they are still desirable, still admired, still powerful. This phase reveals the truth they work so hard to hide. Beneath the arrogance and manipulation lies a deeply insecure person who cannot face the pain of emotional defeat. Their self-protection is not a sign of strength. It is the final, desperate attempt to keep their fragile identity from collapsing completely. In the end, the most powerful truth that emerges from all of this is that a narcissist losing control is not a reflection of your weakness. It's a reflection of your growth. Every tactic they use, every emotional storm they create, every desperate shift in their behavior is rooted in the fear that they can no longer shape your reality. You stepping into clarity, confidence, and independence is what disrupts their entire system. Their unraveling is not chaos you caused. It is the natural consequence of you no longer accepting confusion, blame, or manipulation as a way of life. When their mask slips, when their tactics fail, when their self protection mode kicks in, it shows that their power was always an illusion, held together only by your emotional investment. Seeing these signs is not meant to make you fearful, it's meant to make you aware, because awareness is what frees you. When you finally recognize these patterns for what they are, you stop personalizing their behavior and start understanding it. And understanding is the doorway out of their cycle. Their anger, their desperation, their blame, their sudden attention, or their cold withdrawal are all responses to the same fear, the fear that you have reclaimed your own life. The moment you stop feeding the narcissist's need for dominance is the moment you start stepping into your own power. Their loss of control is your gain of clarity. And once you see the truth, you don't unsee it. You rise above the emotional fog they created, and the strength you build through this process becomes the very thing that protects you in the future. The end of their control is not the end of your story. It's the beginning of a healthier, stronger, and more self-aware version of you.